instead of being treated like a victim, she was kind of treated like a perpetrator. Is this common for Black women in this profession, to be treated in this fashion?
Not even just in her profession, but all around. I feel like Malcolm X said it best. The Black woman is the most disrespected woman in the nation. And he said that 55 years ago, but it still rings true today. And just looking at the way that media continues to perpetuate Black women, here Emijah was a woman who should really be being upheld in the community for all of her community activism and who she was as a person, but it's bringing up some of her past, which they have no idea. They speculated on a lot of the things that occurred, which was not only traumatizing to her, but other women who have been affected by domestic violence and other Black women. So what they really created is what's called vicarious trauma, which is a form of secondary trauma. So me as a Black woman, when I'm reading this article and I see a picture of a Black woman painted on the front of the media screen with all of this negativity about her being arrested and how she was going to beat someone, just all these negative things, and that's the first thing I see with the Black face next to it, I immediately become tense, my body starts tightening up, and it's creating what's called somatic experiences as a form of my secondary trauma. Because I'm hearing, yet again, another Black woman who's done something and has been being painted this way. And especially for those who've been victims of violence or some sort of aggression, it can be triggering to them. So they didn't really think about the impact that it would have on their readers and the experiences of women of color and in anyone who's been a victim of violence, what that could do to them.
It's disheartening, honestly, the way the story broke. And I think one of the biggest pieces was the corresponding artwork that they had at the top that basically was a collage of the crime scene, images of court documents. And she felt that artwork was traumatizing and that she was being cyber bullied. So we really want your opinion on how KUOW creating this artwork and making it visible to the world might have the impact of re-traumatizing Emijah. Kind of what you were just describing.
Yeah, so definitely it goes back to what I said in terms of re-traumatizing her, bringing up her past experiences to the public in front of the world, who's able to read this article, see these images, things that she may not have actually fully dealt with. So we don't know what that may have sparked in her, what type of anxiety or depression, and what coping skills she has to actually deal with it. So they didn't think about that, nor the actual readers and viewers who were seeing this.
It's really unfortunate. And I think that part of, what they were doing was maybe just trying to paint a certain picture. And in their original posting, they had a headline saying that Emijah was reckoning with past demons. And honestly, for someone who has never been convicted of any crime, she's a parent of two, a community leader, how can using words like demon impact someone like Emijah or people who might read that headline and formulate an opinion about her?
So language is very powerful, and I'm often talking to people in the community about the words that we utilize and the impact that it has. So when you use a word like that, oftentimes when we think about reckoning with past demons, we often think about drug use or criminal behavior. So it automatically put the spotlight of her to over-sensationalize what demon she potentially could be dealing with. And one, it wasn't clear, so then it puts the reader in a position to speculate. So then we're creating our own narrative, so it's not giving her a fair shot to actually explain what's actually going on, because we're putting these words out there that aren't clear, and it's very speculative, and it has a lot of harm and danger. So when we use words that aren't actually clear or don't actually fit what occurred, it creates a false narrative and has huge implications on the person they're writing about and the readers, especially Black women and other people of color who are reading such an article about a Black woman.
So a follow-up question to that, do you think that that some of that is culturally based? I mean, because when I read, reckoning with past demons, and I thought about, Black culture or maybe, Christian culture, like the South and that belt, right? Yeah. In my mind, I was just thinking about what the word demon, even more specifically, how it kind of affects our culture, culturally affects us. Do you think that there is some relevance to culture?
There's definitely a relevance to culture, because we all perceive that word particular to how we've been brought up, our past ideals. So that word is very strong, especially in the Black community, when we hear demon, especially when there's a huge portion of African Americans who do ascribe to Christianity. And what does that look like? Or even those who are non-believers, we still know what a demon is supposed to signify. Lucifer. It's nothing good.
Right.
So when you're using a word that has no good intention to a woman who wanted to do nothing more than serve her community. And she's a woman first. Well, she's a Black woman first, honestly.
Yeah.
But she's not the only woman who's been a victim of domestic violence. So what picture does that paint to other people who've been in her situation, who have then become painted in the media a certain way because of the color of her skin? And it really speaks to the overall media and how they perpetuate Black women. We're always over-sexualized. We're always considered aggressive. All of these different things that have a huge impact on our psyche. So I do a lot of work in my private practice to really undo those negative words and images that we see in the media. Because, I mean, racism's not going to end tomorrow, just being realistic. But there are things that we can do to help heal and cope. But it shouldn't be on us. The onus shouldn't be on us to have to do that work. It should be on the writers, who should have some sort of cultural humility to really pay attention to the things that they're putting out in the media and how it can harm someone.
Right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Thank you for clarifying that, even just for me. Now, another, kind of maybe misstep with KUOW was they brought Emijah's court documents to a social worker who had made some assessments about the case, never speaking with Emijah. And now we want to speak to you about your unique experience working in our community and how Black people face unique circumstances. Basically, we really want you to give your insight about the challenges that we face as Black women when it comes to things like this.
So it really goes back to a lot of what I was saying, just the impact of how bad, negative portrayals of the media impacts not only the person you're writing about, but those who are reading it, our children. It has long-lasting impacts. The majority of African American children who are dark-skinned often see themselves in a negative light, and it's due in part to a lot of what the media is doing when we're seeing these horrific images. And I don't know much about the social worker, but I can speak to myself. I went to one of the top universities, University of Washington, where I received a master's in social work, and they have diversity courses, and they attempt to help make you be culturally competent, but that's a false narrative because no one can ever fully be culturally competent. So I don't know his experiences or what knowledge he has of Black women and how we're treated in the media and how he could have done his part. But me, I'm a very unique individual because I'm one of the few clinicians who's actually been trained and certified in racial trauma. So I really look at the unique experiences of the Black woman and the Black male and how our history has really had a strong impact on us. Looking at the works of those like Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and just the impact of all of this.
So it really does revolve around our experiences, and the way that we pick up on certain things is also about our upbringing and our experiences. I would love to know a little bit more about how you view, in my terms, it's almost like we're always trying to undo the work that is messed up. You know what I mean? That is
we're constantly
out there wrong. Do you feel like you deal with that as well?
I do it every day. That's what I do for a living. I'm constantly working to undo racism, undo discrimination, undo these false narratives about mental health and destigmatizing mental illness. So it's a lot of work on our part to undo these things. But if we want to live in a just world and a better society, we have to do better. And I don't know the intent of the writer, but I just want to say if they ever write another article about a person of color, I would ask them to really look to the community, do some research, pay attention to the words that they're using, because again, language is so powerful, and the labels that we put on people or that we assess to a certain narrative, and that's what it does. It creates a narrative. So if you use a word like demon or demonic, you're leading towards something that is negative. There's nothing good about that.
Right. This is where I think sometimes in general, people may feel that, well, you went to school to be a reporter. There's certain ethical things, right, that are embedded in that. I know my degree was in communication, so I just think back to my own training and like going through courses and understanding that really it's important for us to choose our words very carefully when we're writing for the public. I do feel that was maybe a miss here in general. And so I just totally agree with you on that. As we're kind of wrapping up here, I want to make sure that we get anything that you may want to add to this conversation based on your professional experiences and traveling all over the world and doing this. You may be seeing this more than we ever are. So what can you add to this?
I really just want to encourage those who are reading articles, who are doing the work, to really educate themselves and get out and meet other people from other walks of life, because there's so much of the world to see, so much to learn, and really just understand people, because we've all been through something. And just put yourself in someone else's footsteps. What would it be like for you to have something from your past brought up in a negative light without actually going over it, how it actually occurred, and being painted to fit a certain narrative, especially when you're doing something like serving your community. Yeah. My grandmother always used to say, service is the rent we pay to live on this earth. And she was just trying to pay her rent. And look how it paid her back in the end from the community who's writing about her. So I really love that you're putting a platform to this and really doing the work to change that narrative and show that she really was a victim of domestic violence, and no one should have to be re-traumatized, because it takes a lot of work. I see some clients over a year. Like, therapy is not a magic fix. It takes a lot of work, and everybody doesn't always have the resources to experience therapy. So I don't know what Emijah has in her back pocket or what she's going to be able to do to pull through this, but I can imagine there's definitely some sadness and the psychological toll that this takes on our body. I mentioned earlier that I'm a hospice therapist. Yeah. And so I serve South King County, and that the zip codes that I serve, I get a lot of like Skyway area, Renton, and the majority of my patients who are Black and brown are all dying from 30 to 55 years of age. Wow. And it's a result of the trauma that really becomes stored in our bodies and manifests itself through chronic illness, things like cardiac concerns, high blood pressure. Stress literally kills us. And just this is definitely stressful. So I can only imagine the amount of stress that it took on her body. And that takes years off of our lifespan as people of color. So what this is doing is it's really killing us. Wow. And the writers don't necessarily think, oh, this is something that can kill us. But as a hospice therapist who watches Black and brown people die every day at a young age, based a lot on racism and just things in the society that are harming our bodies, because the body remembers everything. And even us, like I said, with vicarious trauma, as we read it and we hear about it, our body takes on some type of toll, whether it's just like, oh my gosh, like that's a lot. Our muscles remember that, and it takes wear and tear on our brains, and we have to do extra work to really regenerate our bodies and our cells to be able to live a fulfilling life. So I would just encourage people to, again, be mindful, because I want everyone to live long, fulfilling, happy lives. And again, racism is not going to end tomorrow, but we can all do our part to create a better world.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue to kind of maybe one of my last questions here is, what kind of words of encouragement will you have for Emijah?
I would say just continue to do the work. Just give yourself grace, and if you know if you can reach out to a therapist, someone that you can talk to, I see you, I hear you, and I'm standing with you. So whatever I can do, if you need something from me, definitely reach out. I'm willing to talk to you, whatever it is. I don't know Emijah, I just learned about her, but in hearing her story, it's the story of so many other women, and I see myself in her story. Mm-hmm. That could be me. Here I am, a professional, I'm a community servant, and what if I decide to run for a board position and then the media pulls up something in my past or an old Twitter post, because my Twitter was off the chain, like, I don't know. So I see myself in her, and I just really want to say, I see you, continue to stand strong and know that the community's standing with you, and yeah.